Yes. Honourable members, having listened to the plea, we have a statement on the 10th anniversary of the June 3rd disaster, standing in the name of Honourable Dr. Zanetor Rawlings, Honourable Member of Parliament for Kwakye constituency, and the chairperson of the Security and Intelligence Committee. Honourable Member, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Right Honourable Speaker, for the opportunity to make a statement commemorating the 10th anniversary of the June 3rd disaster. Mr. Speaker, 10 years ago, over 150 lives were lost and many more permanently scarred when torrential rains led to widespread flooding followed by an inferno at the Goil fuel station at the Kwame Nkrumah interchange. The tragic combination of flooding and fire at the Kwame Nkrumah circle provided us with a sobering reminder of the tragic combination of flooding and fire at that venue, which were consequences of urban planning neglect, environmental degradation, inadequate disaster preparedness, a lack of maintenance culture, and perhaps a lack of establishment of standard operating procedures. Mr. Speaker, as we reflect today, we must remember that the lives lost were not just numbers in statistics. They were parents, children, workers, friends, and neighbors. Entire families were torn apart, livelihoods destroyed, properties destroyed, and dreams abruptly extinguished. Mr. Speaker, even a decade later, the emotional wounds remain raw for survivors, and the structural causes that led to the disaster still confront us to this day. The convergence of unregulated development, weak enforcement of building codes, poor drainage infrastructure, and decades of neglect in solid waste management remain pressing challenges. We must also acknowledge that part of the problem lies in the widespread lack of awareness among the public about the devastating impact of indiscriminate littering and improper waste disposal. Plastic continues to choke our drains, houses continue to spring up in waterways, waste continues to be indiscriminately dumped in our gutters. These are not just environmental issues, they're also issues of governance, of leadership, and of justice. Mr. Speaker, I wish to express sincere gratitude to His Excellency the President of the Republic for recently visiting my constituency to inspect the ongoing dredging works in the Odo River, which is one of the critical interventions necessary to reduce flooding in Kwakye and beyond. I'm especially thankful that he has kept his word to ensure that the works are not only commenced, but are being done properly. It is our collective hope that this commitment will be sustained until we see real transformation in the lives of our people. That said, Mr. Speaker, we must acknowledge that this is not the first time that plans have been announced or budgets approved to address this problem. From the $200 million allocated to the Greater Accra Resilient and Integrated Development Project in 2019, of which $65 million was apparently realigned to COVID expenses, to the recommendations in the Auditor General's performance audit on flood control measures, as well as last year's allocation of $150 million, which was approved by this House for the same project. Mr. Speaker, the people of Kwakye, specifically in Osu, Odona, Adabraka, Asylum Down, and many parts of Accra, cannot survive on words alone. They do need action, and they need the reassurance that the next time we have our rains, they will not lose everything that they have worked for. From the petty trader, the market woman, the child walking home from school, the fuel attendant, These are some of the people who continue to pay the price for our failure to act. Since 2015, we've had numerous flooding events in my constituency, and it continues to worsen in various parts of Accra, just simply compounding the trauma for many people who suffered in June 3rd, 2015. Several years after that, I've stood on the floor of this House and made appeals for the flooding to be addressed, not just in my constituency, but in surrounding constituencies as well. Mr. Speaker, since 2015, we've had at least 2 explosions at fuel stations and several incidents of explosions elsewhere. 10 years on, our tribute must go beyond remembrance. This requires a collective and sustainable commitment to responsible waste management, enforcement of our building regulations, investment in drainage infrastructure, and most importantly, citizen responsibility and government accountability. Mr. Speaker, as we mark this 10th anniversary, let us not simply mourn the dead. We must honor them with decisive action moving forward. We owe it to the memories of the victims to ensure that such a disaster never happens again. Let us strengthen our waste management systems with a bold embrace of the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle. Let us enforce building regulations and protect green spaces. Let's protect the reservoirs where rainwater is held to reduce the deluge that happens when it rains. Mr. Speaker, we need to ensure that NADMO, the Ghana National Fire Service, and other agencies are given the relevant tooling to be able to respond adequately in times of disaster. And they also need to be proactive rather than reactive. Let us remember that resilience is not built on rhetoric, but that it is built on investment, implementation, and integrity, inbuilt into those are regulations and standard operating procedures. Mr. Speaker, we owe it to the victims of June 3rd. We owe it to the vulnerable in our society who have no insurance, no voice, and no buffer. We owe it to the future of not just the city, but the entire country. The investments we make towards safety and proper maintenance are minuscule compared to the cost in lives, livelihoods, and property in the aftermath of any disaster. 1 decade is long enough to learn the lessons. Mr. Speaker, we need to act, not out of fear, but out of a sense of responsibility. I would like to take the opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to call on honorable members to give a 1-minute silence in observance of the departed from the June 3rd disaster. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity.
Honourable members, the statement ably made, and it is for contribution by members. Yes, Honourable Minister, you have the floor.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, June 3rd was an unspeakable tragedy. A tragedy that robbed us of scores of Ghanaian citizens who hitherto were filled with life and vibrancy. Mr. Speaker, one of the most enduring problems of this country is our tendency to play the ostrich and our refusal to face up to reality and a penchant to defer what has to be done immediately. We have also increasingly become indisciplined in the way that we conduct our affairs as a nation. And often efforts to correct this sort of indiscipline yields significant political backlash. Mr. Speaker, hydrologists and engineers tell us that the very topography of Accra lends itself to some level of natural flooding because we sit just at the edge of the sea, the Atlantic Ocean, and therefore water is supposed to run down from the mountains into the sea. And putting ourselves in the path of the water naturally predisposes us to some level of flooding. Whereas it is inevitable that this flooding will occur, there exist solutions, there exist ways through which the impact of this can be mitigated. One of them is the proper planning of our cities and the way that we site structures. A cursory look at the way that our city has been planned, especially those areas that are relatively new, show that there is little to no regard to local level bylaws. People build in waterways without regard for the consequences. And then the slightest rainfall there is, we find ourselves in a deluge. The way that we can honor the memory of our compatriots who perished, regrettably, in the June 3 incident is to resolve as a nation to do the right thing, no matter whose ox is God. Growing up, we learned about the legend of Salifu Amankwa and the way that through unorthodox, if you like, even harsh methods, he was able to instill some discipline into the way that affairs at the Kwame Nkrumah circle or interchange area was conducted. A few years down the line, attempts by subsequent mayors of Accra and local level authorities to instill discipline in the way that people conduct their affairs in the central business districts and other communities within the metropolis were met with stiff political opposition. And since then, we have collectively been frozen into inaction and are simply unable to do what has to be done. So it is all well and good that governments attempt to enforce the law. But if as citizens, we are not amenable to change, we are not amenable to supporting the authorities to do what is right, we will run in circles, lament on a yearly basis, and conduct ourselves like the proverbial butcher who vows every rainy season to roof its house, only for it to forget the moment the rain stops. So we as leaders must take our fair share of the blame for our inability to put national interest above partisan interest. The slightest stress we face from the electorate, we capitulate and steer clear of efforts to decongest our towns, remove structures from waterways. But principally, all of us as a people must bear collective guilt to what happened to our compatriots on June 3rd. It was a result of collective failure as a nation to do what is right and at the right time. So even as we mark this day, and I associate myself with the statement read by my honorable sister, let us remember that there are consequences for refusing to do what is right. There are consequences to taking shortcuts. There are consequences to deferring action that should be taken today. I do hope that a time will come when we will finally get the buy-in of our citizens to enforce the law without facing political consequences. A time may yet come when we should be able to enforce the law, face political consequences, but save ourselves from future tragedy. I thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for your kind indulgence.